All right, so welcome everyone. Hi, it's been a while. We've been extremely busy these days, like everyone is, but we wanted to squeeze in one more webinar this year before everyone is out to the holidays. And today, it's an action-packed webinar, I want to say. There's a lot of information here. I'm excited that we're recording it, and then we'll be able to share it with you after the webinar is done. But the topic today is concentrating on CDPs and in particularly Adobe Experience Platform and mainly data ingestion. We have been doing a lot of work within the AEP space, and we've identified that that's one of these things where it's not enough planning for it. It's a mystery for a lot of people. And it's not a mystery, but it requires the proper steps to do it. So we have the right folks here that we'll introduce shortly to walk us through it. So let's just go through and do a quick intro. I'll start with myself. I'm Jerry. Hello. I used to lead the data activation, but today I am starting a new group with Nats, which is concentrating on solution architecture. Nats, how about you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Nat Sivaramakrishnan, and I'm the VP of Architecture at Softcrylic. And Jerry and I will be working very closely together to work with clients, understand their business problems, develop use cases, design technical approaches, particularly when it comes to implementing CDPs. I have been associated with Softcrylic for this is my 11th year now, and we have implemented a lot of exciting projects together, ranging from implementing data-driven applications, implementing data platforms, implementing CDP solutions for various different clients across various domains. And happy to be part of this webinar and share our learnings and experience with the wealth of knowledge that we have gathered through the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. And Bhupen?
Hey guys, my name is Bhupen Kumar. I'm a director of Application Engine Group. Previously, I was a senior software architect, but then I took over this role, basically just to help Nats and Jerry to implement those projects that we got from the business and solve all those problems. Happy to be part of this webinar.
Sweet. I just noticed this picture that we're using of me is outdated. I'm barely wearing glasses and I have a quarter of that hair. Need to change that one. Anyways, all right, so the agenda. So we're gonna talk quickly for folks. I'm assuming, some people know what AEP is. Some people are probably in the market for AEP. They're considering evaluating different platforms. So we'll give you a quick overview on architecture. I'll do most of the talking here, and then I'll hand it over to Bhupen to talk around the prep and setup. It's really a crucial step in terms of what you need to do to get your data ready to be brought into AEP. Again, AEP, there's no magic there. So there is work that needs to be done before you bring data into the platform. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the best practices. We'll talk even about the schema, what some of the considerations to take when you're designing your schema. And then we'll concentrate on data ingestion, the different ways you can bring data real time, as well as batch, API supported. And then we'll spend some time, hopefully, actually, Sundar, who is the director of DevOps in our organization, he might join us and talk a little bit about data quality. And actually one of the applications we built on top of AEP called Data Facts that helps in monitoring and validating that the data being pushed into AEP is consistent and complete and such. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions towards the end. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Softcrylic before we jump into AEP. As you've heard, we talked a little bit about data activation, about DevOps, about data engineering. I've been with Softcrylic for about a little over 4 years. I've spent 6 years before that at Adobe, in Adobe Consulting. One of the things that makes us special at Softcrylic is that we really bring the best of both worlds, which is the data analytics and engineering. We follow and support the data journey from data collection to insights and analysis, to engineering, to visualization, to activation, and then bring the loop back. So this is where we have the talent across every aspect of the data journey, which gives us this unfair advantage, I put it, where in some situations you want the strategy, but that strategy needs to be supported by the implementation, by the best practices. And this is where our team can work and does work well together. Now, where Nats and I come together, we brought both worlds into the solution architecture group. I used to lead the data activation, Nats used to lead the data engineering, but we found that in many of these implementations, especially when you're building these platforms or bringing a CDP into your company, there needs to be a good blend of the people, process, and technology. So there is the technical aspect, but there is the processes need to be put in place. And also, most importantly, is the skill set and the people. Because at some point, you really want to run this internally and you want to run it with in-house. So this is where me and Nats are building this group that can help clients like you and others in building that internally and step into the data platforms and the CDP space. So enough selling point, let's get into the meat of the discussion. So what is Adobe Experience Platform? I think there's many ways to explain it. I really like this sentence that we put in here, which is delivering good customer experiences depends on having a full and accurate profile of your customer. So one of the things that is important for Adobe for AEP or Experience Platform is that the data is what fuels it. So the data that makes the customer, the full view of the customer. So if you only bring in your analytics data, then that's the best that you can work with. But if you bring your analytics data, your email data, the in-store data, your geolocation data, the more data around your customers you're bringing in, you're building a stronger platform as well as a stronger view of your customer. End of the day, what AEP offers is these three main things. Data foundation. It's not, I want to say it does not, it should not be your only data lake. It should be a data lake used for activation, but you should have in-house your own data platform, because at any point, whether it's from a privacy or you decide to shift to another platform, you really want to be owning your own data. But in many cases, standing a platform like AEP allows you to do the right things in building the right data foundation. So we've seen some customers go through and rebuild their own data model in their own data warehouses, and then bring that or bring a portion of that into AEP. The other thing that this platform offers is the 360-degree view of the customer. Of course, there's never a thing called 360-degree of view, but there's probably 270, 280-degree, which is good enough, where for known customers, this platform is a great fit to be able to bring it and activate on it. And then finally, on top of activating and orchestrating that this platform offers, there is the aspect of machine learning where you can take a step beyond. Now that you have a lot of this data, you are able to run models and personas and be able to activate on it. All right, so why would someone want or need a platform like AEP? I stole this slide from Adobe, so I don't take credit for it, but I think it's really good summary. When it comes to objectives, and these are really objectives we've been hearing from a lot of our clients who are evaluating CDPs. One of them is they want to improve the end-to-end customer experience. It's the bottom line, where they want to make sure what you're getting on email, what you're getting in push, what you're getting in SMS, or your site experience, as well as your club experience or in-store experience is consistent. We're talking to you as a person. We're also talking to you part of a household. So having that end-to-end customer experience is a big objective. Reducing cost and technical debt. This is huge, and it's not the sexiest thing, but it's true. In many cases, you're doing a lot of manual things. You're pulling a file from here, you're pushing in an email, you're sending Excel, nightly batches. it takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of time and money. So you want something automated and something where you're sure it's working properly. Enhanced digital transformation. And believe it or not, there's still a lot of clients, a lot of successful businesses that are stepping into the digital space. I know we're talking, there's chat about Web 3.0, but guess what? We're still struggling in basic things as sending an orchestrated email to specific audiences. So this platform can be a great step and a very big step. That's why it's very important it's taken, done properly to go through a digital transformation. And then to wrap it all up for business objectives, of course, this is where privacy, GDPR, CCPA, and many new things. I'm sure that in a year or two, with the cookies disappearing and concentrating on customers and known IDs, the governance and privacy is going to play a big role. All of these map to these digital objectives. This is where AEP comes in. It is an enterprise data collection infrastructure integration. It is built based on API first, which is very powerful. So basically any data you have, there's a way to bring it into the platform in one way or another. It does offer advanced analytics and data science. There, not only that you can query all your data, but there is a data science workspace, which allows you to bring your data scientists to have their notebooks in there and run and build their own data sets based on what's in the profile. We've actually, a lot of folks from our data science group have been doing work within AEP to build these personas and then activate on it. It's a great way where you don't have to worry about pulling data from different places. It's all there. And then the idea of actionable, right? So the objective is I want to action on this data, and I have insights. I get to know what are these customers, but how do I take action? There is application services that sit on top of AEP that allows you to do so. And of course, with a lot of the rules and the mindset of privacy that is within the platform, there's strong governance and policies that allows you to do so. All right, so if we look at the architecture, this is similar to how I used to explain CDPs, DMPs, excuse me, but in a CDP space, it's the same thing. It's about the data sources, bringing it, building your segments and building your profiles, and then activating on it. So looking from the left to the right, your data sources can be in real time. So if it's interaction, behavioral, you can bring it in real time. It doesn't only have to be Adobe sources. You can bring if you're operating with Google Analytics, you can create a Kafka pipeline streaming in real time to bring your data. Transactional, this can be either in batches, or if your POS systems allow us to, we can do it in real time as well. This is what the power of AEP. It is very API friendly. And as this data comes in, streaming or batch, we'll talk a little bit more about the differences and pros and cons, limitations in a bit. But once this data come in and built within a schema, this schema will be defined to connect these different data sources. And there needs to be discussions and implementations of identity. There is some limitations today with AEP when it comes to householding and person, but those are on track within product to be resolved in the next year. And then delivery, this is where you have existing applications that sit on top of AEP, such as the CDP, the Adobe Journey Optimizer, which is an orchestration layer that has its own email service and push service, and also integrates with other SMS platforms, as well as customer journey analytics, which is your visualization tool that sits on top of your data sets within AEP. All right, enough talk about the general and setting what AEP about. Let's get into the details. Bhupen, to you.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. So the first step of implementation is to have a preparation and setup. And before we start doing any implementation in AEP, we have to finalize the marketing use cases. So this particular step requires the business team to sit with you which is going to drive your technical implementation. Then you're going to review with the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, all the use cases that you have. And you have to define your digital experience blueprint, where you say that, okay, what are my processes that are repetitive, that address a certain strategy or quickly solve a established business problem. So once you define that, you are able to conclude that into a segmentation goals, and those segmentation goals will define your is help you to finalize the use cases. And so it's a that's how you're going to define your marketing use cases. The first thing in the preparation and setup is the XDM schema. So in your database, you have normalized schema. So what we have to do is we have to denormalize and convert into XDM base, which is for AEP. And what schema, basically, if you say what schema is, the experience platform specifically uses schema to describe the structure of data in a consistent and reusable way. So you can have so many sources of data that flowing into AEP, but you need a data set that is already transformed. AEP is not a transformation tool. It's basically, once you start ingesting a data, it has to be in certain defined format. So that's how we use XTB schema for. To define, comes to identity strategy is basically, with this strategy, you want to ensure that your customer receive a consistent, a personalized, and relevant experience, because you are going to ingest the data from multiple sources. So you have to stitch that data together to define a single customer view. Now, it is not with 360 view, but yes, what Jerry said is like 270% view, something like that. And then you have something in AEP which is like identity graph that shows a view of how the representation of how your customer interact with your brands across all the channels, different channels. So that's how your identity strategy defines. In terms of data sets, it's just a storage and management tool, and it store data in data lakes. It also contains the metadata of various aspects of data that you are storing. So data sets, we are going to discuss about data sets. Workflow is a process, it's a step-by-step process of ingesting a data. So once you define a schema, once you define your data set, then you have to define a workflow by doing a mapping from your source, that this is my source. For example, I want to ingest data from CRM dataset, CRM data file into AEP schema. Then I have to define a certain step. I have to follow certain step to accomplish that. So workflows, and AEP provides you a lot of out-of-the-box workflows for all the connectors. Adobe product has its own connectors available, but you can have connectors available for the third party as well. Okay. So when you say finalizing your marketing use cases, as I said that, right? So the first and foremost thing is that you have to document your business use cases. Now it can be any format, whether it's an Excel file, Word document, or Notepad or anything, but you have to define your business use cases. You have to review with the stakeholder. You have to have a digital experience blueprint. It's basically it's a set of artifacts that explain that high value business problems and architecture. So when you sit with the business, you should able to drive into your digital experience, that what you expect from your business to be, and that will drive your segmentation goals. There are few things before you finalize your use cases, that what are the licenses or what are the capability of the AEP platform that you do, right? So in terms of licensing, you need to go and review your contract and understand the limitations. And then what I mean with limitations means you might have a contract for the AEP, but you might not have a contract for data science workspace. So you should not be able to do any kind of AI ML work. So you have to review your contract properly so that you know that which product I'm using, and that will drive your use cases. The other thing is you should not go beyond your primary use cases, because, for example, I have ingested the data into AEP platform. I'm able to successfully create segmentations. Now I want to build a CGA reports, right? So when I'm trying to create a CGA, which is customer journey analytics, right? You might come to a point where the CGA is not supporting the data set that you have ingested, because the data that you ingested, you think about only segmentation within AEP, but then when it goes to CGA, it follows a different format. So if you go beyond your primary use cases, you might stuck to a point where you cannot accomplish your business goals. So that is the third thing is the guardrails. So Adobe Experience provide you a document where they provide all the guardrails. What is a soft limit? What is a hard limit? So you need to understand when you're going to ingest the data, or when you're trying to create events data, or sorry, when you're trying to ingest events data or your profile data, or trying to build segmentations, there is some limits that you need to follow. So if you go beyond that limit, you might not have a same result of your segmentations for your output. Okay. The third thing is in your finalizing the marketing use cases, that identify which data source to ingest into a platform. So your primary data source should be in the platform because it will address your use case. Then what data you need in the data lake for your machine learning and other analysis, and then what data you need for RTCDP for real-time customer data platform. So that is third step. The fourth step is, which is most important, is you have to have your centric ERD diagram for data sources. So you have to create your ERD diagram by defining that this is how my data source is of current state, a normalized way, then how I'm going to denormalize for, which is specific for AEP platform. So that is most important of creating your use cases.
I want to just add a couple of things to what you mentioned, because this is super important. Like the use cases, in many times, I mean, end of the day, you want to create a business requirement document, and that business requirement needs to be very detailed around what is the use case, what data does it need, how does it execute. Like it needs to be baked. If this use case is not baked well, you're going to come to AEP and you're going to be like, which way do I do it, right? Because segmentation in AEP, there's different ways to do it. You need to know exactly what triggers this use case, who qualifies for it, when does it stop. So it's important. The constraints crucial, especially when it comes to, you have a contract, you will have a contract with Adobe to say, this is the number of profiles I can bring into the platform. You might be thinking about, these are my customers that I'm going to bring in. But if you are bringing any data from your from the web data, and the web data might be a combination of anonymous and customer, guess what? Both of these are going to count towards your profile. So keep in mind, this is very important on what you bring and how you bring data into the platform, that you stay within these within your contract specifics. And then also the guardrail around the size of the profile. The profile within AEP needs to be super light so that it can execute well. So you need to make sure you're not bringing everything. I'm sure, I know this is discussion where we talk to data engineers, Bhupen, have seen that. They're like, let's bring everything in. No, that's not going to be the best idea to do so. All right.
Okay.
Next slide, Bhupen.
Yep.
Cool.
So the XTB schema, when we compose the XTB schema, it's a class and field groups. So this parameter diagram that we created, it shows the field as a granular entity. It's defined a single attribute. So defining a schema, you should have field as a granular entity, right? Then the next step is data types, where you can define, it's basically a collection of fields. So you can have, you can create a person data type where you can have a person, first name, last name, home address, all those informations as our fields. The next stage is a field group where it's a collection of data types and the field. So you can have a single data type. So let's say you created a email address. So email address has an address, and then other attributes associated with the email address can be part of a data type or can be its own specific attributes like fields, single attributes. Then comes to the class. The class is the most important stage where you need to define whether this particular data set, that the data source that you're bringing is a profile, a attribute, or event based, or a segment type. So when I say profile, is basically the attribute data. So it is going to ingest into a system. When I say events, it's a timestamp based data, right? So it has a timestamp. It shows a customer action. So profile is basically a customer attribute, and your event shows your customer actions that have. And segmentation is basically a qualified audience based on your use cases. So
Or it can be like a lookup,
yeah,
like
it can be a lookup. Yes, it can be a lookup. So that's how you define. And the top level is record and time series. And this is the most important that you have to define your data source behavior. That okay, I need to have a record or I need to have a time series, because if we miss these steps, what's going to happen eventually is that when you're trying to utilize your AEP data sets, you might end up, because once you start ingesting data into AEP, there is no way to modify that one, because that is a limitation that AEP provides. So you have to go back to the square one where it says that, okay, you have to delete your data set, you have to redefine your schema again, and then you start ingesting the data again. So this is the most important step where you have to define a behavior. If it's any event that define a customer action and you put that particular attributes in record, you might end up losing a lot of dimensions, metrics, and all those informations because you have used a wrong attribute at a wrong place. So make sure that you have defined a behavior properly. Start from the field as a general entity. Yeah. Okay, so how to choose profile versus event versus lookup schema. Again, as I said, that if anything that relates to the customer information can be considered as a profile, then anything that customer actions can be defined as an event, because that's how it works. And any qualified audience can be defined as a lookup or segment-based entity. The one-to-one, yes, it's always be a profile because you are trying to update the same record for every ingestion that happens, right? One-to-many is basically it's defining your experience. So any interaction that happens on the website, and you have an Adobe Analytics connector that flows the data into AEP, all the interactions will record it as time series events, right? So that is one-to-many. Segmentations and activations use cases help determinations. Basically, when you define your once you start ingesting data into AEP and your data is getting ingested, then you can have your segmentation creations and then stitching those segmentations to your destination for the activation. So you can have Adobe Target, Facebook, LinkedIn as your destinations, and you can have those audience flowing to your destination. Lookups, lookups can be used now. Jerry, I just need your help in this one. The lookups is a best practice that we use, still follows, or?
I can take that.
Yeah.
So lookups are basically dimensional data that will support your profile and event data, right? To explain the user actions more in detail and to break down the data by various different segments. For instance, if you are implementing a retail solution, then a retail solution has like point of sale data, then it has like the customer data. But then through point of sale, there will be events about information about like when did that sale happen and who was the customer ID and all that. But then, and the products that were purchased. So the lookup data will basically define the products and the product details so that it'll help you break down it into various different segments when you're actually doing the activation. So that's where it helps. And there's a model that we will be presenting to you in the upcoming slides that explains this in detail.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, so this is a simple schema, right? So you have, it's a radial solution schema where you have profile information, as you can consider that as a profile behavior profile class. Then your event class is basically a purchase detail. You can have data from your Adobe Analytics where your ECIDs basically bring the information. Then you can have Adobe campaign data that coming in as an event, right? And your lookups can be your store and product details.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
one thing that I would like to point out here is that, right, your identity strategy is really, really critical. Now, ECID is like experience, Adobe's Experience Cloud ID.
Cloud ID.
If you're implementing your CDP solution and your user behavior data collection solution, all and everything using Adobe Tech Stack, ECID will work the best because it integrates tightly very well, and it'll be able to seamlessly connect all this data coming from various different sources, maybe be it your email marketing campaign data or your Adobe Analytics data, target data, and everything. But if you are using a variety of tools, let's say if an organization is using Google Analytics to track some of the analytics and user behavior data, and then they have a custom solution to track the point of sale data and whatnot, then ECID, you'll have to think about a different identity strategy because the IDs that connect everything will have to change. So whatever said and done, you need to have one single identity that connects all this data together. And if that's not available, first we would need to implement that and then bring the data into AEP. Otherwise, it'll be extremely difficult to bring all that data together within AEP. That is number one. Number two is, this obviously will work best for known users, right? Like your own first-party users where you know them, they have registered with you and whatnot. But there's always like new customer base that we will be targeting. And there's going to be like anonymous users data that we'll be collecting. And as part of your identity strategy, you need to come up with workflows that will help you tie the anonymous data and then build the profile for that user, and then implement workflows that will tie it back into the right customer over time. And there are solutions available within AEP, which is called like the secondary IDs and whatnot. Apart from the primary identity setup process, we should use that to tie the anonymous users back into the root customer profile. And that's how it works. But then these are the two key things that you need to consider as part of implementing your identity strategy. In this example, as you can see, the core customer information will be a profile class, which basically defines your customers and has all your other additional customer attributes like their email address, phone number, physical address, and other attributes that define your customer. So that definitely is a profile type schema that you need to set up within AEP. Then these customers generate data, right? They perform various different actions across your websites, and they could be like purchasing details through your digital properties. You could have implemented Adobe Analytics to track the behavioral data, and then you might be activating email campaigns on your existing customers. So these are all like event type data because they are time series data. They have a specific timestamp, and these data points cannot be altered. And these are all always new data that are generated and that are inserted. Once the data is generated, you cannot go back and then update them. And if any such data, if you have any such data, then you classify them as event type data. And then finally, these are custom classes where defines metadata of information that are collected through your event, behavior.
These are your lookups, right? This can be
those are the lookups, yes.
Yep.
And custom classes are basically the lookups. So in this example of a retail solution, you have customer information, their purchase details, their behavior data, and then your campaign performance data. That's all sitting in your event type. And then you have your stores information. So let's say if this is a physical store sitting across various different locations, then that store, in your purchase details, you'll have information about from which store the customer purchased the product. So those will go into your lookup data, which will be typed back in. And AEP will also allow you to logically establish a relationship between all these data points. And they recommend that you do it using a star schema and not use like a snowflake schema, which Bhupan will talk about in just a second. I'll make one other additional point and then wrap up my argument. The one thing that you also need to keep in mind is as you define this, these are all called like profile fragments, right? So if you were to look into an ERP solution, purchase details will be spread across multiple different tables, right? You might have like an order header table in which you'll collectively have the order information. Then there'll be like a line item table that will track all the products that were purchased. Then there will be discount coupons that were applied to that order, and all that will be broken down into multiple different tables. But when you're trying to bring all that information into AEP, you need to make sure that you group them into a single fragment of data and then store it in AEP. That's the easiest way to logically represent the data and also access the data within AEP. And AEP, the XTM schema, which is basically nothing but experience data model, right? It allows you to define your data in hierarchical model, right? And that makes you to build all these profile fragments easily and then keep your data models simple. So this makes it easier to define segment or create segments of audiences and then activate on those campaigns. And that's very important as you define your schema models. Thanks, Bhupan. Over to you.
And you need to keep revisiting your guardrails because you can have, because once you start creating identity stitching, there is a certain limit that Adobe Experience gives you, right? So yeah.
So just before we get into this, I just want to check on time. We have 20 minutes and we still have a good chunk. So let's keep moving. Yeah, we're getting good stuff.
Yeah, we want to talk about the schema consideration. So we already know that it's a hierarchical schema. So you can, and there is a limit for that, right? How deep you can go in a hierarchy, right? So once you define those schema, you need to make sure that you are checking your guardrails. Just make sure that you're not going beyond the limit, so that your profile stitching, identity stitching happens properly, and you're not losing any data in AEP. The recommended profile size is right now it's 100 KB per profile, and you have to just make sure that once you start creating those unified profile and all the attributes, it just make sure that it will not occupy more than 100 KB. You have to adopt iterative modeling approach. So once the data is loaded into a data set, it's representing a schema. It is not possible to remove, because once you start ingesting so much data, the only way you can go back is to remove the data set, remove the schema, redefine the schema again, creating a data set again, and then re-ingest the data by doing a remapping. So yeah, however, you can include new columns, but I'll go to next slide where I'll talk about more on what you can do in the data sets. Yeah, here. So when you define data sets, there are few changes that Adobe allows. There are few changes that Adobe doesn't allow. But within the data sets, you can have, for a single schema, you can have multiple data sets. If you want to enable any data sets for profiling, you have to first enable your schema for profile, and then only you can enable your data set for a profile. Then only that will be considered for a merge policy. So in Adobe, we have something called merge policy, where you have to define your merge policy, and that defines that your event-based schema and your profile-based schema, how it is going to drive to a unified profile. Data sets also allow you to set certain policies. So there are a lot of policies that Adobe AEP provides you, but you can build your own policies based on your destinations, segmentations, or across like global policies defined for any namespace. And then you can enforce those policies in your data set. The only thing is that for every data set, you have to do this, right? So there is we cannot apply one policy to multiple data sets. It is one-to-one mapping. So every data set has its own governance policy. So changes that are allowed once the data is loaded into the schema. Yes, so we'll talk about what are the changes. So you can add a new field to your schema, make any field options or mandatory, right? You can change that. You can change your display name and descriptions for better understanding when you're trying to create your segmentations. You can enable your profile to participate in the you can enable your schema to participate in the profile. You need to make sure that you cannot enable a profile until you define an identity. So you have to define your primary identity, you have to define your secondary identity, then only you can enable your schema for profiling, and then eventually you can make your data sets enable for profile. So what is not supported, you cannot remove a previously defined field, you cannot introduce any new mandatory field, renaming or redefining for existing field, removing or restricting previously supported field values. You cannot do that. Moving existing field to a different location in the tree, the schema hierarchy. No, you cannot do that. Deleting a schema is not possible, and disabling the schema for participating in the profile. You can, once you enable, you cannot disable that. Right? And there are few connectors, out of the box connectors that are available that automatically creates profile for you. So you need to just make sure that you, for example, if you implement Adobe Analytics, the Adobe Analytics connector automatically creates automatically creates a schema and your data sets for you. So before you start ingesting anything, you just need to go and revisit your schemas when it automatically created by AEP for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is for Adobe Analytics, it depends on how you bring in data, right? So if you're bringing it directly, you already have Adobe Analytics implemented 100%, but there's also a lot of what we've seen is we're implementing new Adobe Analytics using, for example, the Web SDK, which has its own thing. We're not going to get into that now, but we're going to have webinars, more webinars on that topic in the future. Okay.
Right. So unit profile. So unit profile is multiple steps that you have to do, right? So you're ingesting a data into a data sets. Unit profile is basically a representation of your the schemas, your profile and your event schema in a one single place that you can see there. Now you have to follow a proper stitching process, means defining your identities across your schema. When you define your identities, then what you're going to do is you're going to define the merge policy. Merge policy is basically defining that, okay, merge policy also follow two approaches where it is default time based, means all the profile schemas that you are going to create in your AEP platform will be part of your union profile, or you want to restrict that to a certain data sets, certain schema. So you say that, okay, I have two data sources and I want only those two data sources to be part of union profile, even though my other sources it still follows profiling, but it should not be part of this stitching process. So I can do that, or I can follow a default time-based approach where anything that convert into a profile will be part of this new union profile schema. So that is how you do it. Yeah, we can just talk. We can go next on this one. Yeah, over to next.
Next one.
Yeah. No, previous one.
All right. So yeah, can you go back to the previous slide? Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can't drive today.
Thanks, Bhupan. So now those were all the prerequisites and then the schema setup before ingesting data into AEP, right? Now, when it comes to ingesting data into AEP, you can bring data from any of the Adobe product suites that you have implemented within your organization, and bringing data from within Adobe stacks is really easy and straightforward, and they provide direct connectivity. You can bring in data from your enterprise data sources. They do provide out-of-the-box connectors, 40 plus connectors that lets you bring in data from various different sources. And they also have like 200 plus partner connectors from which you can bring in the data. Obviously, web and mobile SDK is something that you can use to implement your custom solution to ingest data in real time from your own digital properties within your organizations using Adobe's framework. And there's also like batch and streaming API process. So what you can do is, like, as part of your data sources, you can actually create and define an API within AEP, and then take that API endpoint with appropriate credentials and then link it into your digital properties and implement a solution that will collect data in real time and push it into data sets directly. So these are all the 4 ways in which you can collect data that will allow you to create that 360-degree view of customers. Next slide, please. Obviously, yes, you can bring in data from various different sources. You prep the data. As you're ingesting the data into AEP, AEP does provide options to really customize that data, right? They provide like inbuilt functions that will allow you to merge 2 different columns or parse a value from a single column and then create a new column and all that stuff. That's the data prep capability that they do provide. Now, let's say that you are bringing in data from your ERP store in multiple different data fragments, like the example that I talked about earlier, where your order details spread across 4 or 5 different tables. Within AEP, you can use the query service, which will merge all this data together and then create a single data set. But that's not the best practice that we recommend, because the query service, right now, at least within AEP, they don't have a scheduler available that will automatically trigger the process to merge this data and then create this new data set. You will have to implement your own custom solution. So in our implementations, the best practice that we recommend is to basically set up a pre-ETL process prior to pushing the data into the CDP, where you collect all this data into data fragments by channel, and then push them into AEP in a hierarchical data model. And that's more easy and manageable to control the data consistency and quality. So once the data is in, then that'll allow you to basically create your real-time customer profile. And that is driven by the identity services, which is again driven by the schemas that's sitting in your data lake. Next slide, please. Now, this is like high-level architecture of how various different ingestion options work within AEP. Like I talked about earlier, as you can see on the top left, you have the mobile web SDK implementation, which you can integrate. Adobe will provide you this edge network, right? And this is something that you can create from the data source interface within AEP. Then to that AEP, you can use the SDK and then start pushing in the data. Now, this edge network in turn will push the data into Kafka pipeline, and it can push the data into data lake, or it can also push it directly into the real-time customer profile to have that data available more immediately. If you're trying to push it into the real-time customer profile, we need to ensure that the data that's coming in conforms to the XTB schema, and otherwise the ingestion process will fail. The second option is that you can also use that streaming API service and implement your own custom solution to push data into AEP, and that'll allow you to push the data into your data lake. And then from that point on, you can implement your workflows within AEP to process the data. And the third option is to ingest the data using batch connectors. And AEP has something called as workflows, where you can go and select a data source, and it provides all this interface where you can use appropriate API credentials to connect to the source, extract the data, map it to your XTB schema, and then set up and schedule that process so that it continuously start ingesting the data and move it into your AEP data lake. So these are the 3 different options that you have. Next slide. Sure. Sorry, I'm rushing because
no, you're good. You're good. You got 7 minutes.
Yes. So these are all the out-of-the-box connectors that are currently available in AEP, right? So I mean, I talked about the 40+ connectors that are available out of the box. There are also like 200+ additional connectors, and we can also, implement our own custom connectors outside of AEP. And using this HTTP streaming process, we can push it into AEP datasets if need be. And we have done that, and that is why I've identified this HTTP API as well as part of this. But for most of the solutions that we have implemented, most of the offline data comes from the enterprise data store, because all our clients, they want to create like a single source of truth, and that also, quite frankly, is the best practice. We recommend to have all the data in their ERP, and so it's easy for us to process and then create those data fragments to push it into AEP that will solve to collect the data that's required for solving the marketing use cases. Some of the considerations that you need to keep in mind before ingesting data into AEP, right? This is something that I also touched upon earlier. create like singular data sets per channel so that it's easy to join the data across various different channels. And AEP also performs well. If you have more and more data fragments within AEP, joining that data and bringing them together will take more time, and it's not efficient to manage and organize it. The implement ETL processes that will validate your data for data consistencies. It's easier. There is processes within AEP that will allow you to ingest data based on certain rules, right? You can say a particular column from a data source file needs to be an email address, or it cannot be empty. You can define your custom rules to validate the data as it is being ingested into AEP. But the problem there is that if the data does not conform to those criteria, then the ingestion will fail. You can configure it in such a way where that particular record does not get ingested, or you can also set up a threshold where, like, if you see about 20 or 30 plus issues of that sort, you can, fail the entire batch of ingestion. Though this guardrail is available, if you go that route, the aftermath is really, problematic, because then your downstream processes will get impacted, and you will have to go back, fix the data, then re-ingest, and then implement your downstream processes. So the goal is to create a balance when you define all those data quality constraints within AEP, so that it doesn't impact the downstream process. So we are better off keeping this outside before ingesting the data. So keep in mind, boop and dust on it. Once the data is ingested, it cannot be, the schema cannot be changed. And so to that end, we recommend that you sort of follow an incremental data modeling approach. If your business organization might have like 20 different use cases, but pick up only top 5 that solves most of your problems, implement that first, and then add more use cases. Don't try to solve all the use cases. The problem becomes extremely complex, and there'll be more and more challenges. And that's something that I'm talking based on our experience from implementing various different solutions. Though AEP provides monitoring capabilities, they don't have alerting mechanisms, when something goes wrong as part of your data ingestions. So someone needs to go in and look into the issue in AEP interface, and that's a challenge. And I'll talk about what are the alternatives, because at SoftCrylic, based on our experience, we have created products that will help mitigate these issues. We talked about this, events data. When it comes to managing data and deleting data, right? Event data is mostly additions. So you can go in and then select a batch and then delete it. But profile data are all like incrementally updated, right? So let's say in batch 1, you updated certain user properties, and in batch 3, you updated additional user properties for the same user, or overwrote some of the other attributes that were ingested in batch 1. It sorts of gets updated incrementally. So deleting profile data might be tricky. You cannot delete it. If you delete it, if you want to delete it, you'll have to delete the entire data set and then repopulate it. So bear in mind that when data goes into profile, you will have very limited options to delete it. But for event data, yes, you do have options to delete it because it's time series and does not overlap. And yes, thanks. When it comes to monitoring, AEP provides 2 different types of monitoring. One is aggregated monitoring, which is basically a top-down view of your data that is ingested, right? And broken down by various different workflows. Then, so you can go to it basically tells you like, okay, this is the batch ingestion that happened, and these are the issues, and this is the data source. There's another monitoring that they also offer, which is end-to-end. So because within AEP, data ingestion alone is not the capability set, right? You ingest the data, then you build identities are identified, then the data is merged together to build a 360-degree customer view, and then segments are created to group the customers, and then finally the data set is activated across various different channels. So you also have interfaces to view reporting across what happened. So let's say you ingested 1,000 data points, and out of the 1,000, only 800 records got ingested, 200 had issues, And of those 800 records, only 600 had identities that we were able to generate. And of those 600, the data was broken down across various different segments, and that breakdown, and then finally, how many records were activated across various different channels. All that is what you'll be able to see within the end-to-end monitoring. AEP also provides ability to review the ingestion issues with standardized error codes and detailed error messages. However, you need to enable that detailed error messages view to track the detailed error messages in your schema. Otherwise, as part of the standard ingestion process, it will not be tracked.
Yep. So Nats, you got 3 minutes.
Yes.
So we can keep, actually, Sammy, is there any questions so far in the chat, or are we able to continue to the end?
No questions so far, so go.
Okay.
Feel free.
I think we can skip this slide. I talked about
Okay.
it. So we can move on to the next one. As part of the data quality, right? These are all the different types of data quality rules that AEP allows you to set up in when you ingest data into it, right? You can do data type checks, enum checks, range checks, pattern checks, and format checks. Some are supported in batch ingestion, some are not. Now, as I said earlier, the biggest problem with this is like there's no alerting mechanism. And also, if you have like a very critical workflow process set up that where a lot of downstream solutions depend on this data being available on time, and if your data sources have issues, then all that will be affected. In our implementations in the past, what I've seen is that whenever there are data points, we segregate the data points, right? What are critical data points without which we cannot activate our downstream use cases, and what are data points with which least impact data points with which, if there are errors, we can manage and then go ahead. So we need to segregate that. And with AEP, that is generally quite a problem, right? So that is why we at Softcrylic, we sort of implemented a solution called Datafax. Can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
Yes. So Datafax, what it does is like we used AEP's Firefly framework, and then we built this solution on top of AEP. So this is sort of like a monitoring tool which will keep monitoring all the data that is being ingested into AEP. And it will provide you alerts if something goes wrong, and allow you to take actions proactively. And it will also validate the quality of data beyond the standard data consistency checks that AEP provides to you. And if there are problems, yes, you can have a separate, it'll allow you to ingest the data, but you can set up a process to re-ingest that data by fixing the data ingestion processing issues. But at the same time, allow all your downstream processes to work properly, because you let the data go in and then resolve your activation use cases. But at the same time, what were the problems, so that you can go back and then fix those issues, and then re-ingest that data later on to create a consistent data sets within AEP.
And just I just want to add to that, like Datafax is actually, it lives on top of AEP. So the way it's built in an application that looks, it's part of the platform. So it's not like a different tool that you need to integrate with AEP. Actually, integrating it is very easy. And we have a webinar that me and Nat and Sundar did, part of the Adobe developer. We'll put a link to that here, so you can see what it's about and see in detail. And if you're interested, definitely can join the beta that we're running in Q1 of next year.
Next slide.
Yep.
So these are some of the benefits of using Datafax. Obviously, it goes beyond data consistency checks. It helps you understand your profile completeness. It uses machine learning models to validate your data for anomalies, and it helps you. It triggers alerts and then helps you proactively work on those issues, as opposed to manually going in and then looking for issues within your data sets using the reports. And it goes beyond the standard KPIs that AEP provides to validate and then monitor the data that you're ingesting into AEP. So those are all some of the benefits. And I think with that, it's a wrap.
It's a wrap. We're 1 minute over. Sammy, any questions we have?
No question.
All right, well, that's, guys, this has been awesome. I hope the audience enjoyed it. We are here for additional questions or anything comes up, you can reach out to us either on our website or on LinkedIn. We can have Nats and Bhupen come and share some more of their knowledge. Nats, Bhupen, thank you so much. This was awesome. Sammy, thank you for organizing. And talk to you guys later.